So I want to say welcome to Diabetic Success, the Holiday Challenge, Day 7, our last official day of the challenge. It's been wonderful having you here with us during this whole challenge. And today that we're going to talk about the second part of lowering insulin resistance, which we started talking about on Friday. We looked at nutrition and some of the ways that we can lower insulin resistance. We looked at some other strategies that can help us. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of movement. Remember that when we lower insulin resistance, we're actually addressing a root cause of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. So we're not just addressing a symptom here, we're actually addressing a root cause of the metabolic mess. Joan Walsh once said, "A man's health can be judged by which he takes two at a time, pills or stairs." And I love that because that really is true. The better our physical movement, the better our health. And as people age, often the first thing that goes is their physical activity. And as their physical activity declines, so does every other aspect of their health. I have done elder care for going on 12 years now, and I have watched the elderly in my family go through these stages and noticed how their decline in their ability to move actually really contributes to a decline in so many aspects of their life. And so as we stay moving, we actually help to stave off many other aging processes. But let's take a look at how that works for controlling blood sugar. I want to start by talking a little bit about Jim. Jim wasn't a diabetic. He was dealing with heart issues, but he was one of my clients in a program that I was running, and movement was a big challenge for him, which is why I wanted to share his story. At that time, he was in his early 40s and he had had several heart attacks. He'd had a bypass surgery. His cardiac physician had told him basically there was not much more they could do for him medically, and he really needed to make some changes. So he came to an intensive lifestyle change program that I was running. And when he arrived, he had basically hadn't been very long since he'd been out of the hospital, but he was taking medications, a lot of different medications. One of them was nitroglycerin, which is a medication you take to dilate the blood vessels of your heart. And his heart condition was so severe that when he woke up in the morning, he had to take a nitroglycerin and wait for it to work before he could get himself out of bed and put his clothes on. That's how severe his chest pain was. They started him on cardiac rehab about the same time he came to my program. He reported to us that when he showed up for cardiac rehab the first day, they put him on a treadmill. They hooked him up to the cardiac monitor so they could monitor his heart as he exercised. They put the treadmill completely level and started it at the slowest speed. In about 5 minutes, he had to get off of the treadmill because he was having so much chest pain. And as he came to this lifestyle program and he learned about things he could do to improve his health status, he changed his movement. He continued with his cardiac rehab program, which was basically just increasing his exercise as tolerated. He made some dietary changes. He learned skills on managing stress. He learned about how all these different aspects of lifestyle work together and started putting into practice these new habits. He was in our program for 4 weeks, and it was just amazing to see how God can bless the healing of our bodies when we cooperate with the laws He's put in our beings. You know that at the end of 4 weeks, Jim was able to walk 2 miles a day with no chest pain. He no longer had to take medication to get out of bed in the morning. In fact, he rarely needed that medication anymore. He was able to continue with his work. He had young adult children, like late teens, early 20s at that time, and he really was motivated to watch them, finish college, get married, all of those great things. And his doctor had basically given him just maybe a few more years if he was fortunate, because his condition was so bad. But I've been just so thrilled and delighted. We've been Facebook friends for years now, and he's still kicking. And I want to say it's been 15 years since he went through that program. And he's looking healthier than ever. He's, obviously doing so much better than the doctors thought he could. And it all started when he made up his mind to make some changes that would really help him move forward in his health. And as he was able to move more, I mean, he just saw all these other things getting better. So we're going to look at different aspects of exercise and different types of exercise and what are the best kinds in the best ways for controlling blood sugars. So when we look at timing, one very important time to exercise is directly after a meal. Our highest blood sugars have been shown to peak, our meal blood sugars peak 45 to 60 minutes after our first bite. And that's usually when you'll get the highest spike in blood sugar related to eating a meal. So we find that if we get up and move as soon as we get up from the table, then it really blunts that blood sugar spike. It doesn't take a lot of exercise. 10 to 15 minutes is kind of a minimum. You do want to do 10 to 15 minutes, but obviously 5 minutes is better than 0 minutes. So it is dose related, but we want to aim for 10 to 15 minutes. If you're challenged with your blood sugars, you're finding they're not really normalizing, then 30 minutes would be recommended after each meal, as breakfast, lunch, supper. And it's not like getting out and running a marathon or like speed walking or power walking or jogging or anything like that. We really just want some gentle walking. Your stomach needs blood to digest your food. And if you exercise too vigorously right after a meal, it will take the blood that your stomach needs for digestion and then shunt it to your legs. So you don't want to do that. So it's important that this not be an intense exercise period, but that it be regular. And the more consistent you are with this, the bigger the impact you'll see on your hemoglobin's A1C. So 10 to 15 minutes right after a meal, and 30 minutes is even better. And it actually makes a huge difference if you do it immediately, as soon as you finish eating. Don't wait 10 minutes to get started on that little walk. Don't wait 15 minutes. It really has to happen right away. That's when we see the really powerful impact of after meal walking. Quality of exercise is also important because there are different ways to exercise, aren't there? So aerobic exercise is exercise that makes your heart beat a little faster, okay? And we need aerobic exercise a minimum of 45 minutes a day, at least 5 times a week. If you're not there yet, what you'll want to do is start with wherever you are and just build up gradually. This is not something you want to go into like, oh, I haven't been exercising at all, and so I'm going to go for a 1-hour walk today. No, you want to build up to it so that your body gets used to it. You can build up your stamina. But that you want your goal to be a minimum of 45 minutes at least 5 times a week. This exercise, because it's aerobic and it needs to be fast enough and vigorous enough to raise your heart rate, you want to do this kind of exercise either before breakfast or several hours after a meal. Okay, so you have to think about, when does this fit in your program? I actually aim for 2 45-minute periods a day, and I try to do it 7 days a week. My first 45-minute is outdoors, and I almost always do that before breakfast as much as I can. Now that the time has changed, it's made it easier for me. There was a couple of weeks there where it was just too dark for me to do it before breakfast. And I like to get sunshine when I'm doing my walk. So I do try to time it so it's after sunrise. But I can get that first 45 minutes of the day in before breakfast. And then I try to get another 45 minutes, if it's not outdoors, at least on the treadmill. And so that's a little more flexible. Sometimes I'll do that a little while after lunch or in the evening, early evening, not just before I go to bed. Now, how do you know if your exercise is intense enough to be aerobic enough to get a good benefit? Well, the criteria that's really easy. I mean, some people like to check their pulse and they have these, fancy Fitbits and things, and that's fine. But for a lot of people, it's hard to be really consistent with tracking it that way. And so here's a really easy rule of thumb. As your walking. I always recommend walking just because it's one of the best exercises you can do. And if you do it briskly, it works your whole body. It's not hard on your joints, and most people can do it without a lot of investment in fancy equipment or gym membership or anything like that. Your biggest investment might be a good pair of walking shoes. You want to be walking fast enough or doing whatever exercise it is. Say it's an exercise bike, or you're swimming, or you're on the treadmill. You want to be able to talk. So you don't want to be so breathless that you can't talk, but you shouldn't be able to whistle or sing easily. So that's kind of a good criteria for knowing that you're in the good fitness building range of activity. Another type of training that is also important is strength training. And we need to aim for 20 minutes of strength training 2 to 3 times a week. Because strength training involves really stressing your muscles so that they can get stronger, your muscles need some a recovery day between workouts. So you don't want to do strength training 2 days in a row. You want at least one day off between your strength training days. And there's a lot of ways to do this. Obviously, one way that a lot of people do is they go to the gym and they lift weights, but you don't have to do that. You can use anything that involves muscle resistance. And there are even exercises you can do that use your body weight for that resistance. So, especially with COVID and a lot of gyms not being open, I know that I had a gym membership that I was like, for the first time in my life, I was able to do that. And then COVID came and shut the whole thing down. And I was so disappointed because I loved to swim. And so it was really nice to be able to go swimming. But that's not an option for me right now. So we can do other things. You can use elastic band resistance training, and you can buy the elastic bands online or at a lot of sporting goods stores. You can also Google for no equipment resistance training, and you can find all kinds of information, tutorials, YouTube videos that can help you with muscle strength building, even without any equipment, just using your body. So don't be intimidated. Figure out what works best for you. With all exercise, the most important kind of exercise is the one you will do regularly. So find something that you can enjoy. If the social aspect is what you need to stick with it, find a buddy that will exercise with you. One of the things that I really like to do, I went to a water aerobics class. So I got to get in the pool and, do my water thing, which I really enjoyed, but it was also with a group of other women. And it was a lot of fun. We made some good friends, and it, I just never wanted to really miss those exercise sessions because of the social component. So for me, that really helps when I have that. That's not true for everybody, but you need to know yourself and know what would it take for you to be consistent with your exercise. That's one of the most important aspects. Because for a diabetic and even a pre-diabetic, exercise actually works in your body as a form of blood sugar lowering medication. So doing it consistently in about the same amounts every day has a lot of advantages. You're more likely to be able to have good control of your blood sugar if your exercise routine is basically the same every day. The benefits of strength building exercise is that you get better insulin sensitivity. It actually uses up glucagon stores in your muscles, which enables your muscles to store more glucose there. And that really helps with lowering blood sugars and also with insulin sensitivity. It helps to kind of unglue those sticky locks on the cells that keep the sugar out. So obviously with better insulin sensitivity, you get lower blood sugars. It also increases your metabolism and can also help with posture and balance, especially as you do upper body strength building. That can be really helpful. Another type of exercise is intermittent training. And I wouldn't worry about doing intermittent training until you have the other three kinds of exercise in place: the after meal, the aerobic, and the strength training. Those three need to be in place before you add intermittent training. Now, intermittent training has actually been found to be extremely effective for blood sugar control. Lifestyle Centers of America taught all of their clients to do intermittent training, and they did a lot of research on the impact of intermittent training on blood sugar levels, and they found it to be one of the most effective forms of exercise for diabetics. Now, what is intermittent training? Basically, it means you exercise at high intensity for a short period of time, and then you rest for a little while. Then you do a little spurt of high energy, and then you have a rest period. And then you might do several repetitions of this pattern. One of the things Dr. Youngberg recommends is going slow, like if you're, say you're walking or jogging, do kind of a slow walk or jog for 90 seconds, and then do fast for 30 seconds. And the fast is like as fast as you can go. So you really try to push yourself, but it's only 30 seconds. And then you go back to a slower walk and kind of let your heart rate drop a little bit, and then repeat the 90 seconds really fast with 30 seconds slower. So that is one form of intermittent training, and that's one that you can try doing. You want to work up to maybe 8 sets of intermittent training 2 to 3 times a week. So that can be another tool in your toolbox. But I really do recommend you do the other 3 kinds of exercise first, and then add this as you're able. The benefits of intermittent training is that it improves thyroid function. It helps to lower your triglycerides. It actually helps your body to produce more growth hormone, which is very helpful in your metabolism. And you actually burn more fat as you do intermittent training as compared to some other kinds of exercise. So all of these exercise modalities that we've talked about are most effective if they're combined with other healthy habits. Things like good nutrition, regular sleep, and adequate hydration. So as Cindy introduced the term, and I love the term, all of these things are synergistic. It means they work together, and the effect when you use them together is more than the effect of these individual things taken one by one. So that is a really some important things to remember about exercise. Now, there's a few last pieces I really want to cover here. I want to talk a little bit about accountability, support, and learning more and more about dealing with diabetes and how to manage it most effectively. And then at the end, I've got a challenge bonus for you that I'm going to announce, which is kind of a bit of a surprise. I haven't let you know about it before, but I've got something extra for you in this challenge that I think you will enjoy. So we'll talk about that at the very end. We've gone through getting a baseline. We've talked about setting up a plan, and hopefully you've been thinking about picking your destination. Where is it you want to end up at the end of the holidays and in a little bit longer term with your health in general? So when we talk about taking a trip, we also have to choose our form of transportation. How do we get from point A to point B? Now, if I wanted to go from here to New York City, I could get on a train and I could travel cross country. I could take a boat and go through the Panama Canal, maybe go from San Francisco down through the Panama Canal over to New York. I could get on a plane in Sacramento and fly directly to New York City. I could maybe get in my little camper and camp my way across the United States. That might take me a little bit longer, but I could do that myself. Or I could, decide to invest in a sports car and really do it quickly. So there's a lot of different forms of transportation to get to our destination. And it's similar when we're looking at trying to get to our goals. Some questions that you want to think about as you're thinking about how you're going to get to whatever you've set as your goal is, do I want a do-it-yourself approach? Or do I want a community to help support me? Do I want to take my time to do this? Or do I want to do it as quickly as possible? Would a guide keep me on track and help me save time? What are the obstacles that I might need help with? These are all questions you need to think about as you're figuring out how am I going to implement and get to the destination that I've planned for over the length of this challenge. Do it yourself and self-guided options. Now, these might take a little longer, and you might find some surprises along the way, but it is probably your lowest cost option. And there are different ways you can do this. You could maybe take a class online or offline that teaches you more about using lifestyle interventions for managing your diabetes. You might read a really good book like Goodbye Diabetes. And there's a couple of others. I really recommend the books by Dr. Michael Greger. Even though I don't agree with every single thing he has in that book, it's like 99% of it is just such helpful information and it's very good research. Everything that he has in his book is annotated and is a great bibliography. You can look up all of the research that everything in his books comes from. His two books are How Not to Die, and there's a whole chapter on diabetes and nutritional things that can help diabetes. So that's a really good resource. Another one is his second book, How Not to Diet, which is all about weight control. And so obviously that also has a ton of information that can be helpful for dealing with prediabetes and diabetes. So there are other books you might read, or you might do research on the internet. One of the things I would really caution you on, though, is if you do internet research, you have to be really careful and check your sources, because you can get really frustrated doing it because you will find all kinds of conflicting information. And so it's important to figure out, okay, where is this information coming from? Is there good research behind this? Do we have information over a long period of time about how this particular intervention works? Things like that. And, is this like a scholastic academic source? Is this a medical authority? Is this, someone who's just really into selling supplements? There's just like all kinds of information out there. So there's some caution with the internet research approach. The fastest, whether you're going by land or water, obviously is getting in a plane. And that would be a done for you program. It's customized to your unique situation where you work one-on-one with someone who has a lot of experience in dealing with chronic lifestyle disease management. It's kind of like even getting a charter flight, and it goes exactly where you want it to go. So you're working with somebody that's helping you go directly to your goal. It's quicker than a lot of other methodologies, but it can also be the most expensive. Then there's the intermediate options, where maybe you let somebody else do the driving, but you have a community, you have a social support, you have reliable accountability and regular access to expert tools and strategies. So that'd be more like a group coaching option. So there's a lot of different ways for you to get from A to B, but I want you to take all of these things into consideration as you decide what you're going to do. Because you're right now at the place where you have to decide what is the form of transportation. How are you going to get to your destination? So I really want you to think about that. I'd ask you as part of your homework on Friday to start thinking about that. So hopefully you have some ideas in mind. I would also like to, as part of this challenge, get on the phone with you, like one-on-one, and just kind of chat with you and help you make sure you've got a plan that will work for you to get from A to B. And so you can do that really easily by going to this link. I'm also going to just text you the link because I know not everybody maybe gets this all copied down, but it is an easy one to remember. It's theharvestcook.as.me/4 Lucia. And the L is capitalized on that. So if you go to this link, what it'll do is it'll let you see all the open slots on my calendar, and then you can look at your calendar and you can pick a slot that works for both of us without having to do a bunch of going back and forth. Oh, does this date work for you? Oh no, that one doesn't work. How about this one? You don't have to do that because this will take you directly to my calendar where you can just click on a date that works for you, and that will set you up. You will get an email that has the Zoom link so that we can just get on a Zoom call, because I like to do that. I think that's just a really nice way for us to finish off here what the work we've done in this week. And I just want to make sure that everybody walks away from the challenge with a plan that is executable and you know how you're going to do it. And so because everybody's in a little bit different place with a little bit different challenges, I would like to do this one-on-one. So please plan to do that in the next day or two. Now, I also want you to remember that if you don't choose to actually execute on your plan, you're not taking charge of your situation. And not taking charge is expensive. Not only will you not get through the holiday successfully, but the longer you're not addressing your health, the harder it is to reverse disease, the more you end up spending on doctor bills, the more hospitalizations you can expect. the more you will spend on medications. So there are a lot of cost to not making some good decisions about how you're going to keep moving forward. For example, with a type 2 diabetic, the average out of pocket expense is $16,000 a year. Now, depending on your insurance or your particular situation, you might be spending more, you might be spending less. But overall, this just gives you an idea of how much these things can actually affect you. Now, I want to share with you the story of Nellie. Nellie came to work with me with one of the programs that I was doing, and she did it by setting up a call with me. And we got on the call and we talked about what were her big obstacles, what were her big challenges. And we went through this whole GPS structure with her. And she was able to say, well, you know, this is really the destination that I want to get to. And I really think that it will be helpful for me if I can get to this destination. So we talked about how we were going to do that. And we figured out a plan that would get her through her obstacles. And she started to execute on her plan. And we had set up an accountability and support with her so that we were checking in with each other over a number of weeks. And as she continued to execute on her plan, it got really exciting because she had been really apprehensive about whether she was going to be able to do it. And she found that she could. And some things weren't as hard as she thought they were going to be. And she started feeling better. She had been just really struggling with some health challenges for a number of years. And so she was addressing something that she thought would help one of her challenges. Well, it turns out that within 3 weeks, not only has she addressed the challenge that she was working on, but she found that by doing that, she had improved her health in several other aspects that she had no idea would be affected by the changes she was making. And I mean, when we got on the phone, she was like, I just can't believe this. It's like a miracle. She said, I have tried so many things to deal with this other problem. And just dealing with the one that we chose and going forward with it has just been such a big help to me. And she was just thrilled. And I talked to her not long ago, and she's been able to continue to execute on her plan and is continuing to get better, to feel better, and to do well. And so I know that for a lot of people, having that accountability and support can be super important for success. Now I have an announcement for you, and that is that I am going to give you a challenge bonus day, which means tomorrow morning, for anybody that wants to join me, I will be here at our regular morning time. And we're going to do one more day because I really, really wanted to give you one more tool as you go forward for success during the holidays. And that is tapping into the power of habit. You know, whenever you make this plan, I mean, I've heard from each of you, if you're going to execute the plan you've been talking about, it will involve some sort of change. You're going to do something a little bit differently than you were doing it before the challenge. And so I really want to give you some tools that help you to tap into the power of habit going forward, which will really help to make the changes that you've decided you're going to do, whether they're small or whether they're big, to be more successful in implementing them on a consistent and extended term basis, not just for a few days or a few weeks. So tomorrow morning, that's what we'll do. That's an extra. I know I told you this was like a 7-day challenge, and this will be day 8, but I just wanted to give you this bonus because I think this material will be really helpful to you. And I want you to be really successful going through the holidays. So I hope that it will work for you guys to meet with me tomorrow. I will record it, and you will have this one extra bonus session. So I just want to encourage you to take charge today because you can do it. Now I'd like us to take some time for questions and answers. So you can feel free to unmute. We will take any questions that you have at this time.
Someone asked a few days ago, and I think maybe it was Denise who isn't here, about vegan keto. And
oh, yeah.
You said that you would address it. I think I know probably why you would not be in favor of it, because it would contain more fat. But
well, here's what I will say. I actually On my website, I have a couple of articles about vegan keto. And so I won't go into everything that I put into those articles, but if you go to theharvestcook.com, you can go into, you'll look at the little tabs at the top, and there's an area for nutrition. And if you'll look in there, and you can also do a search on the site. Just look in vegan keto, and I think I have 2 or 3 articles on it in there. And here's the issue with vegan keto. It absolutely can be done. So you can do keto without animal products. And if for any reason somebody feels that they really need to do keto, that is the only kind of keto I would recommend to them, because there are so many negative effects of a non-plant-based keto diet that I could never recommend that to anybody. A vegan keto I can recommend. Here are the things you have to think about if you do a vegan keto. First of all, because certain food groups are so limited, if you're actually going to stick to vegan keto, as in being in ketosis pretty much all the time, then you end up eliminating most fruits most of the time. And there are a lot of micronutrients that are important for our long-term health that you are going to be missing if you don't get variety in the fruit food group. It also doesn't address effectively some of the root causes of the metabolic mess that leads to prediabetes and diabetes. So that's another caveat for the vegan keto for diabetics. Another issue is that it limits the amount of fiber that you will get. For example, we talked about the importance of high fiber for blood sugar control long-term, as well as for long-term health. Like, it lowers your risk of cancers. It lowers your risk of a lot of other diseases to have a high fiber diet. And a vegan keto, I would challenge someone to show me how you can get 40 grams of fiber on a vegan keto menu. It's just really, really difficult, because you can't eat a lot of beans because they count the carbohydrates in the beans. At least most keto diets would. And so you end up with some more refined products. A lot of vegan ketos use a lot of tofu and sometimes tempeh. And I think you can run into problems because those aren't whole foods. So they're missing some of the pieces that God designed for those foods to have. The fat, if all the fats are from natural fat sources like nuts and avocados and so on, I don't really have that much of an issue with having a larger amount, because overall, usually the calories are not excessive. So that, it's just part of the kind of keto plan, excuse me. But there's a moderate amount of protein as well. So it can be a struggle to get enough protein that is all vegan. And what I have seen, I've researched what a lot of the plans that are out there, a lot of the people that are pushing vegan keto. And I think that if somebody wants to do it, I do not recommend they do it long-term. I do not think it is sustainable for long-term health for more than maybe a month. Okay. So it's like, sure, you want to try it for a few weeks. I'm not going to give anybody a hassle about it. But I don't recommend doing it long-term because of the micronutrients you're missing, and there's no amount of multivitamins you can take to make up for the way God packages phytonutrients in food. When we know that you can get all kinds of antioxidant supplements, and they simply don't work in our body the way they work when we get them as part of a whole food. And so for long-term health, I cannot recommend vegan keto over the long term. But I can be useful for some people in the short term. And so I put guidelines in my articles about how to do it if you're going to do it short term. So I hope that answers anybody's question on that. Feel free to contact me, ask more questions. Does that resonate with you and make sense, Jacqueline?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the fiber part of it. As far as fruit does not raise your blood glucose level, because the fructose goes directly to your liver where it's stored. But I'm sure you knew that. So that's the issue with fruit. and that there's no there are no micronutrients in fruit that you can't get in other sources that are not as high in carbs. But you have to do a little research
Well, you know,
to find out what those foods are.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of interesting things that I would like to address in what you said. And I think it's important for people to not just take what I say, but go do some research on it as well. I very much encourage that. But there are two things that I would have a question about, and that is about fruit not raising blood sugars. I have never seen a diabetic whose blood sugar doesn't go up with fruit. So because
Right.
fruit, the fructose from fruit can't go to the liver from the stomach. It goes through the blood. And those simple sugars are actually absorbed through the lining of the stomach directly into the blood. So it raises blood sugars faster than anything else in your diet. Those are the simple sugars. So if you're eating fruits, you're getting a lot more simple sugar in the fruit. It does go into the bloodstream. It doesn't stay there because, yes, a lot of it is either goes to the cells or is processed in the liver. But fructose, as it's found in fruit, does not contribute to fatty liver issues, as does high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah,
And
that's the worst.
oh, it's terrible. High fructose corn syrup is almost, it might be, I don't know if it'd be too strong to call it a poison to the body, because it really messes with our metabolism and with our liver function. And one of the epidemics we are seeing in the United States today is fatty liver, which has to do with the high levels of refined and high processed foods. So that is an issue, but is not an issue that you're going to run into with fruit. The micronutrients in fruit, there are a lot of antioxidants that we find in fruit that are not found in all other categories of plant foods. So I would take a little bit of issue that you can get those micronutrients anywhere else, because they actually are spread out throughout the fruit and vegetable kingdom primarily, also some in whole grains and some in legumes. But the fruits and vegetables are where you find the majority of phytonutrients. And although we have identified several thousand phytonutrients, there are still many that we have not identified. And so we don't know what we're missing when we don't have a large variety of foods from all of the food groups. And so any vegan menu plans that I've ever seen allow for a few berries every day, but like you can never eat like a banana or pineapple, tropical fruits. I mean, like just almost any quantity is going to be too much carb. Or if you have like, you know, a quarter cup of one of those fruits, that's all your fruit for the day. When that we know that you can't get all the phytonutrients you need in that small amount of fruit. You will get a lot in your vegetables, but they aren't the same. So those are the two things that I would just make a comment on. And I would be happy to know if you find out something different from that, please let me know. Or if you come up with a menu plan where you actually are seeing like 40 grams of fiber a day, I'd really like to see that too. So, because I'm always interested in learning, because if there's ways to do that that are going to cover some of these other bases for health, then, you know, I'm good with that. But that is my biggest concern, is making sure that the nutritional plan that we take is one that is sustainable long term, and that long term it's not setting us up for different kinds of health problems. And that's what we find with most keto diets. It sets you up long term for other problems. Besides the fact that we have absolutely no studies showing that a keto diet is helpful for diabetes, in a study that has run anything over a year.
Just one more thing, speaking of supplements, is that vegetarians and vegans have to take a B12. As from all that I've read, a B12 is not present at all in any plant-based foods.
Well,
so how would you address that?
Very good question. And I'm really glad you brought that up as well. If you go completely plant-based, you want to make sure that you are getting a source of B12. And there are a couple of different places, or several different places, where you can get your B12. B12 is manufactured by microbes. And so it is, most people get a lot of B12, for example, from animal products. But it is not always well absorbed. So even Carnivores can end up with low B12 levels because their B12 is not always well absorbed, especially if they have any problems with production of intrinsic factor in their stomach, because you need this intrinsic factor in your stomach to absorb vitamin B12. As people age, their levels of intrinsic factor drops. So elderly people often have trouble absorbing B12 in their diet in any case, even if they're getting it from animal foods. B12 is stored in the liver, so it's not something you have to have like every day because it is stored, and so you can use it for a while. As people are transitioning into a plant-based diet, it doesn't usually create a problem if they've been omnivores, carnivores before that, because they already have stores of B12. But if they are moving into a plant-based and they stay there for an extended period of time, it's very important that they pay attention to B12. Now, the easiest way to get B12 is through a supplement. I highly recommend supplements that are liquid and absorbed in the mouth, because it can be absorbed directly through the mucous membranes into the blood and be metabolized. And that bypasses problems with low levels of intrinsic factor, which not everybody has in their gastric pH and their gastric chemical mix, is what I meant to say. Also, there you can get liquid that's absorbed in the mouth, or you can also get these little, they're called B12 dots, and they dissolve under your tongue. Now, the amount of B12 that you actually need to avoid deficiencies and issues related to it, which you definitely want to avoid because they like involve your nervous system and your ability to think, and they're really very important. You need about 5 micrograms a day. The B12 dots are one of the lowest level dosages of supplements that you're going to find on the market. And it is, if I remember rightly, I haven't looked at it just recently, but I believe it's 500 micrograms, which means one tablet is actually enough for 100 days. So I know people who were plant-based vegans for decades and completely avoided any problems with B12 deficiency by simply taking one of those little B12 dots and shaving off a little bit onto their plate every day. And then they make that one dot last for a number of days. Or you can take a whole dot and then take it maybe like twice a week or 3 times a week, and you have plenty of B12. But you also need to be aware of the fact that non-dairy substitutes like almond milks, rice milks, soy milks, most of those are fortified with B12. So you can get some B12 there. Red Star yeast flakes, nutritional yeast flakes, are also fortified with B12. They're another source. Many dry cereals are fortified with B12. They constitute another source. And there's even been some evidence that microbes in our gut make B12 and can be absorbed from the gut into our bloodstream. So there are a lot of different ways to get our B12, but to be sure, I always would recommend that someone take a supplement. It doesn't have to be every day, and it doesn't have to be very much, but you do need that at least 5 micrograms a day bit. And because it's stored, that's why you can take a larger dose, but then not have to take it every day. I hope that's helpful. And then for a lot of people, especially as they get older, getting the form that dissolves in the mouth is more effective for them than getting it in a multivitamin because of the absorption issues. So I always do recommend that. So those are great comments, great questions. Really appreciate that. And set up a time on your calendar that works for us to talk. Because I want to make sure that you get out of this challenge everything you signed up for, and that includes being ready to execute it as you go forward. So thank you very much. I will look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning.